What are synthetic fuels?
Synthetic fuels, commonly called synfuels, are gaseous and liquid fuels produced synthetically from coal and oil shale. Basically, coal is converted to gaseous or liquid forms in coal-based synfuels. These are easier to transport and burn more cleanly than coal itself. Synthetic natural gas is also produced from coal. Disadvantages of these processes are that they require a large amount of water, and the new fuels have 30 to 40% less fuel content than pure coal. Synfuels from oil shale are produced by extracting the oils from the rocky base. Gasoline and kerosene can be produced from oil shale. Synfuel may also be obtained from biomass from human and animal waste. The waste is converted to methane by the action of anaerobic bacteria in a digester.
Are certain areas of the tongue associated with a particular taste sensation?
All taste buds are able to detect each of the four basic taste sensations. However, each taste bud is usually most sensitive to one type of taste stimuli. The stimulus type to which each taste bud responds most strongly is related to its position on the tongue. Sweet receptors are concentrated at the tip of the tongue, while sour receptors are more common at the sides of the tongue. Salt receptors occur most frequently at the tip and front edges of the tongue. Bitter receptors are most numerous at the back of the tongue.
What are vitamins and minerals?
A vitamin is an organic, non-protein substance that is required by an organism for normal metabolic function but cannot be synthesized by that organism. In other words, vitamins are crucial molecules that must be acquired from outside sources. While most vitamins are present in food, vitamin D, for example, is produced as a precursor in our skin and converted to the active form by sunlight. Minerals, such as calcium and iron, are inorganic substances that also enhance cell metabolism. Vitamins may be fat or water-soluble.
Can weather be predicted from the stripes on a woolly bear caterpillar?
It is an old superstition that the severity of the coming winter can be predicted by the width of the brown bands or stripes around the woolly bear caterpillar in the autumn. If the brown bands are wide, says the superstition, the winter will be mild. But if the brown bands are narrow, a rough winter is foretold. Studies at the American Museum of Natural History in New York failed to show any connection between the weather and the caterpillar's stripes.
Which countries in the world generate the most electricity using wind energy?
Denmark receives approximately 20% of its electricity from wind energy. Spain and Portugal receive over 11% of their electricity from wind energy.
How serious is Bell's palsy?
Bell's palsy, a form of temporary facial paralysis, is the result of damage or trauma to one of the cranial nerves. The nerve may be swollen, inflamed, or compressed, resulting in an interruption of messages from the brain to the facial muscles. Individuals with Bell's palsy may exhibit twitching, weakness, or paralysis on one or both sides of the face, drooping of the eyelid and corner of the mouth, drooling, dryness of the eye or mouth, impairment of taste, and excessive tearing in one eye. Although the symptoms appear suddenly, individuals begin to recover within 2 weeks and return to normal function within 3 to 6 months.
When was the first weather satellite launched?
The first weather satellite, the television and infrared observation satellite, TIROS-I, was launched by NASA on April 1, 1960. Although the images were not of the same resolution as we have now, they were able to reveal the organization and structure of clouds and storms. One of its accomplishments was to see a previously undetected tropical storm near Australia. The information was conveyed to the people so they could prepare for the approaching storm. It operated for 77 days until mid-June 1960 when an electrical fire caused it to cease operating.
What is high-speed steel?
High-speed steel is a general name for high alloy steels that retain their hardness at very high temperatures and are used for metal cutting tools. All high-speed steels are based on either tungsten or molybdenum, or both, as the primary heat-resisting alloying element. These steels require a special heat so that their unique properties can be fully realized. The manufacturing process consists of heating the steel to a temperature of 2150 degrees Fahrenheit to 2400 degrees Fahrenheit. 1175 degrees Celsius to 1315 degrees Celsius, to obtain solution of a substantial percentage of the alloy carbides, quenching to room temperature. Tempering at 1000 degrees Fahrenheit to 1150 degrees Fahrenheit, 535 degrees Celsius to 620 degrees Celsius, and again cooling to room temperature.
What is nuclear magnetic resonance?
Nuclear magnetic resonance, NMR, is a process in which the nuclei of certain atoms absorb energy from an external magnetic field. Analytical chemists use NMR spectroscopy to identify unknown compounds, check for impurities, and study the shapes of molecules. They use the knowledge that different atoms will absorb electromagnetic energy at slightly different frequencies.
When do most tornadoes happen?
Tornadoes can happen at any time of the year and at any time during the day or night. Tornadoes are most likely to happen in the United States during March through August. There is a general northward shift in the tornado season from late winter through midsummer. Regionally, tornado activity increases in the central Gulf Coast as early as February, then shifts to the southeastern Atlantic states in March and April before moving to the southern plains in May and early June. The greatest amount of tornado activity is in June and July in the northern plains and upper Midwest. Statistically, most tornadoes strike between 4 p.m. and 9 p.m.
What is a supernova?
A supernova is the death explosion of a massive star. Immediately after the explosion, the brightness of the star can outshine the entire galaxy, followed by a gradual fading. A supernova is a fairly rare event. The last supernova observed in our galaxy was in 1604. In February 1987. Supernova 1987A appeared in the Large Magellanic Cloud, a nearby galaxy.
How much saliva does a person produce in a day?
Saliva is a mixture of mucus, water, salts, and the enzymes that break down carbohydrates. Awake individuals secrete saliva at a rate of approximately 0.5 milliliters per minute, or an average of 480 milliliters of saliva in a 16-hour waking day. Various activities such as exercise, eating, drinking, and speaking increase salivary volume.
How fast does a hummingbird fly and how far does the hummingbird migrate?
Hummingbirds fly at speeds up to 71 miles, 80 kilometers, per hour. The longest migratory flight of a hummingbird documented to date is the flight of a rufous hummingbird from Ramsey Canyon, Arizona, to near Mt. St. Helens, Washington, a distance of 1,414 miles, 2,277 kilometers. Bird banding studies are now in progress to verify that a few rufous hummingbirds do make a 11,000 to 11,500 mile, 17,699 to 18,503 kilometer Journey along a super Great Basin high route, a circuit that could take a year to complete. Hummingbird studies, however, are difficult to complete because so few banded birds are recovered.
How are caves formed?
Water erosion creates most caves found along coastal areas. Waves crashing against the rock over many years wear away part of the rock, forming a cave. Inland caves are also formed by water erosion, in particular, groundwater eroding limestone. As the limestone dissolves, underground passageways and caverns are formed.
What is a Leyden jar?
A Leyden jar, the earliest form of capacitor, is a device for storing an electrical charge. First described in 1745 by E. George van Kleist, c. 1700 to 1748. It was also used by Peter van Musschenbroek, 1692 to 1761, a professor of physics at the University of Leiden. The device came to be known as a Leyden jar and was the first device that could store large amounts of electric charge. The jars contained an inner wire electrode in contact with water, mercury, or wire. The outer electrode was a human hand holding the jar. An improved version coated the jar inside and outside with separate metal foils with the inner foil connected to a conducting rod and terminated in a conducting sphere. This eliminated the need for the liquid electrolyte. In use, the jar was normally charged from an electrostatic generator. The Leyden jar, which makes the hair stand up, is still used for classroom demonstrations of static electricity.
What products does 1 acre of trees yield when cut and processed?
There are approximately 660 trees on 1 acre of forest. This number of trees can yield approximately 105,000 feet. 32,004 meters, of lumber, more than 30 tons, 30,000 kilograms, of paper, or 16 cords of firewood.
What are the uses of peat moss?
Peat moss, genus Sphagnum, grows mostly in bogs. Peat mosses are favored by gardeners for their ability to increase the water-holding capacity of soils. Due to large, dead cells in their leaf-like parts, they are able to absorb 5 times as much water as cotton plants. Peat mosses are also used as damp cushions by florists to keep other plants and flowers damp. Species of sphagnum also have medicinal purposes. Certain Aboriginal people use peat mosses as disinfectants and, due to their absorbency, as diapers. Peat moss is acidic and is an ideal dressing for wounds. During World War I, the British used more than 1 million wound dressings made of peat moss. Native North Americans used species of the genera Neem and Bryum to treat burns. In Europe, species of the genus Dichronoesia have been used to waterproof roofs.
Was Napoleon poisoned?
The most common opinion today is that Napoleon Bonaparte, 1769 to 1821, Emperor of France from 1804 to 1815, died of a cancerous, perforated stomach. A significant minority of doctors and historians have made other claims, ranging from various diseases to benign neglect to outright homicide. A Swedish toxicologist, Sten Forshovbod, 1903 to 1985, advanced the theory that Napoleon died from arsenic administered by an agent of the French royalists who was planted in Napoleon's household during his final exile on the island of St. Helena.
How long is the Grand Canyon?
The Grand Canyon, cut out by the Colorado River over a period of 15 million years in the northwest corner of Arizona, is the largest land gorge in the world. It is 4 to 13 miles, 6.4 to 21 kilometers, wide at its brim, 4,000 to 5,500 feet, 1,219 to 1,676 meters deep, and 217 miles, 349 kilometers, long, extending from the mouth of the Little Colorado River to Grand Wash Cliffs, and 277 miles, 600 feet 445.88 kilometers if Marble Canyon is included. However, it is not the deepest canyon in the United States. That distinction belongs to Kings Canyon, which runs through the Sierra and Sequoia National Forests near East Fresno, California, with its deepest point being 8,200 feet, 2,500 meters. Hell's Canyon of the Snake River between Idaho and Oregon is the deepest U.S. canyon in lower Leaf Territory, also called the Grand Canyon of the Snake. It plunges 7,900 feet, 2,408 meters, down from Devil Mountain to the Snake River.
Who was the first space tourist?
The first space tourist was Dennis Tito, an American businessman who paid an estimated $20 million to travel to space with a Russian crew to spend time on the International Space Station. He departed aboard the Russian Soyuz spacecraft on April 28, 2001 and returned to Earth on May 6, 2001.
What are the major classes of plant hormones?
The 5 major classes of plant hormones are auxins, gibberellins, cytokinins, ethylene, and abscisic acid.
Why was the Michelson-Morley experiment important?
This experiment on light waves, first carried out in 1881 by physicists Albert A. 6 Michelson, 1852–1931, and E. W. Morley, 1838–1923, in the United States, is one of the most historically significant experiments in physics and led to the development of Einstein's theory of relativity. The original experiment, using the Michelson interferometer, attempted to detect the velocity of Earth. With respect to the hypothetical luminiferous ether, a medium in space proposed to carry light waves. The procedure measured the speed of light in the direction of Earth and the speed of light at right angles to Earth's motion. No difference was found. This result discredited the ether theory and ultimately led to the proposal by Albert Einstein, 1879–1955, that the speed of light is a universal constant.
What is a food web?
A food web consists of interconnecting food chains. Many animals feed on different foods rather than exclusively on one single species of prey or one type of plant. Animals that use a variety of food sources have a greater chance of survival than those with a single food source. Complex food webs provide greater stability to a living community.
How do chlorofluorocarbons affect Earth's ozone layer?
Chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, are hydrocarbons, such as freon, in which part or all of the hydrogen atoms have been replaced by fluorine atoms. These can be liquids or gases, are non-flammable and heat-stable, and are used as refrigerants, aerosol propellants, and solvents. When released into the air, they slowly rise into Earth's upper atmosphere, where they are broken apart by ultraviolet rays from the sun. Some of the resultant molecular fragments react with the ozone in the atmosphere, reducing the amount of ozone. The CFC molecules' chlorine atoms act as catalysts in a complex set of reactions that convert 2 molecules of ozone into 3 molecules of ordinary oxygen. This is depleting the beneficial ozone layer faster than it can be recharged by natural processes. The resultant hole lets through more ultraviolet light to Earth's surface and creates health problems for humans, such as cataracts and skin cancer, and disturbs delicate ecosystems, for example, making plants produce fewer seeds. In 1978, the U.S. government banned the use of fluorocarbon aerosols. And currently aerosol propellants have been changed from fluorocarbons to hydrocarbons, such as butane.
What causes sinkholes?
A sinkhole is a depression shaped like a well or funnel that occurs in a land surface. Most common in limestone regions, sinkholes are usually formed by the dissolving action of groundwater or the seepage of above-ground streams into the limestone below, causing cracks or fractures in subterranean rock. The collapse of cave roofs can also cause large sinkholes or landslides. The resulting depression may be several miles in diameter.
Which planets have rings?
Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune all have rings. Jupiter's rings were discovered by Voyager 1 in March 1979. The rings extend 80,240 miles. 129,130 kilometers, from the center of the planet. They are about 4,300 miles, 7,000 kilometers, in width and less than 20 miles, 30 kilometers, thick. A faint inner ring is believed to extend to the edge of Jupiter's atmosphere. Saturn has the largest, most spectacular set of rings in the solar system. Saturn's ring system was first recognized by the Dutch astronomer Christian Huygens. 1629 to 1695, in 1659. Its rings are 169,800 miles, 273,200 kilometers, in diameter, but less than 10 miles, 16 kilometers, thick. There are 6 different rings, the largest of which appears to be divided into thousands of ringlets. The rings appear to be composed of pieces of water ice ranging in size from tiny grains to blocks several tens of yards in diameter. In 1977, when Uranus occulted, passed in front of a star, scientists observed that the light from the star flickered or winked several times before the planet itself covered the star. The same flickering occurred in reverse order after the occultation. The reason for this was determined to be a ring around Uranus. 9 rings were initially identified, and Voyager 2 observed 2 more in 1986. The rings are thin, narrow, and very dark. Voyager 2 also discovered a series of at least 4 rings around Neptune in 1989. Some of the rings appear to have arcs. Areas where there is a higher density of material than at other parts of the ring.
What are the largest and smallest aerial spider webs?
The largest aerial webs are spun by the tropical orb weavers of the genus Nephila, which produce webs that measure up to 18.9 feet, 6 meters, in circumference. The smallest webs are produced by the species Glyphosis cottoni. Their webs cover an area of about 0.75 square inch, 4.84 square centimeters.
What is the Coriolis effect?
The 19th century French engineer Gaspard C. Coriolis, 1792 to 1843, discovered that the rotation of Earth deflects streams of air. Because Earth spins to the east, all moving objects in the northern hemisphere tend to turn somewhat to the right of a straight path, while those in the southern hemisphere turn slightly left. The Coriolis effect explains the lack of northerly and southerly winds in the tropics and polar regions. The northeast and southeast trade winds and the polar easterlies all owe their westward deflection to the Coriolis effect.
What is the difference between an ophthalmologist, optometrist, and optician?
An ophthalmologist is a physician who specializes in care of the eyes. Ophthalmologists conduct examinations to determine the quality of vision and the need for corrective glasses or contact lenses. They also check for the presence of any disorders, such as glaucoma or cataracts. Ophthalmologists may perform surgery or prescribe glasses, contact lenses, or medication, as necessary. An optometrist is a specialist trained to examine the eyes and to prescribe, supply, and adjust glasses or contact lenses. Because they are not physicians, optometrists may not prescribe drugs or perform surgery. An optometrist refers patients requiring these types of treatment to an ophthalmologist. An optician is a person who fits, supplies, and adjusts glasses or contact lenses. Because their training is limited, opticians may not examine or test eyes or prescribe glasses or drugs.
Who successfully demonstrated that curved balls actually curve?
In 1959, Lyman Briggs, 1874 to 1963, demonstrated that a ball can curve up to 17.5 inches, 44.45 centimeters. Over the 60 feet 6 inches, 18.4 meters, it travels between a pitcher and a batter, ending the debate of whether curved balls actually curved or if the apparent change in course was merely an optical illusion. Briggs studied the effect of spin and speed on the trajectory and established the relationship between amount of curvature and the spin of the ball. A rapidly spinning baseball experiences two lift forces that cause it to curve in flight. One is the Magnus force, named after H. G. Magnus, 1802 to 1870. The German physicist who discovered it, and the other is the wake deflection force. The Magnus force causes the curved ball to move sideways because the pressure forces on the ball's sides do not balance each other. The stitches on a baseball cause the pressure on one side of the ball to be less than on its opposite side. This forces the ball to move faster on one side than the other and forces the ball to curve. The wake deflection force also causes the ball to curve to one side. It occurs because the air flowing around the ball in the direction of its rotation remains attached to the ball longer and the ball's wake is deflected.
How does jet lag affect one's body?
The physiological and mental stress encountered by airplane travelers. When crossing 4 or more time zones is commonly called jet lag. Patterns of hunger, sleep, and elimination, along with alertness, memory, and normal judgment, may all be affected. More than 100 biological functions that fluctuate during the 24-hour cycle. Circadian rhythm can become desynchronized. Most people's bodies adjust at a rate of about 1 hour per day. Thus, after 4 time zone changes, the body will require about 4 days to return to its usual rhythms. Flying eastward is often more difficult than flying westward, which adds hours to the day.
What is the float glass process?
Manufacture of high-quality flat glass, needed for large areas and industrial uses. Depends on the float glass process, invented by Alastair Pilkington, 1920 to 1995, in 1952. The float process departs from all other glass processes where the molten glass flows from the melting chamber into the float chamber, which is a molten tin pool approximately 160 feet, 49 meters, long and 12 feet, 3.5 meters, wide. During its passage over this molten tin, the hot glass assumes the perfect flatness of the tin surface and develops excellent thickness uniformity. The finished product is as flat and smooth as plate glass without having been ground and polished.
How does blood alcohol level affect the body and behavior?
The effects of drinking alcoholic beverages depend on body weight and the amount of actual ethyl alcohol consumed. The level of alcohol in the blood is calculated in milligrams. 1 milligram equals 0.035 ounce. Of pure, ethyl, alcohol per deciliter, 3.5 fluid ounces, commonly expressed in percentages.
How many acres of wetlands have been lost in the United States?
Wetlands are the lands between aquatic and terrestrial areas, such as bogs, marshes, swamps, and coastal waters. At one time considered wastelands, scientists now recognize the importance of wetlands to improve water quality, stabilize water levels, prevent flooding, regulate erosion, and sustain a variety of organisms. The United States has lost approximately 100 million acres of wetland areas between colonial times and the 1970s. The 1993 Wetlands Plan established a goal of reversing the trend of 100,000 acres of wetland loss to 100,000 acres of wetland recovery. The most recent Wetlands Status and Trends Report, 1998 to 2004, published in 2005 by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, showed a gain of 191,750, 77,630 ha. Wetland acres, or an average annual net gain of 32,000 acres of wetlands. The net gain in wetland area is attributed to wetlands created, enhanced, or restored.
What are the Platonic solids?
The Platonic solids are the 5 regular polyhedra, the 4-sided tetrahedron, the 6-sided cube or hexahedron, the 8-sided octahedron, the 12-sided dodecahedron, and the 20-sided icosahedron. Although they had been studied as long ago as the time of Pythagoras, around 500 BCE, they are called the Platonic solids because they were first described in detail by Plato, 427 to 347 BCE. Around 400 BCE, the ancient Greeks gave mystical significance to the Platonic solids. The tetrahedron represented fire. The icosahedron represented water, the stable cube represented the earth, the octahedron represented the air. The 12 faces of the dodecahedron corresponded to the 12 signs of the zodiac. And this figure represented the entire universe.
How do plants obtain nitrogen?
The primary way that plants obtain nitrogen compounds is via the nitrogen cycle, which is a series of reactions involving several different types of bacteria, including nitrogen-fixing bacteria and denitrifying bacteria. During nitrogen fixation, symbiotic bacteria, which live in association with the roots of legumes, are able through a series of enzymatic reactions to make nitrogen available for plants. Nitrogen is crucial to all organisms because it is an integral element of proteins and nucleic acids. Although Earth's atmosphere is 79% nitrogen, molecular nitrogen is very stable and does not easily combine with other elements. Plants must use nitrogen in its fixed form, such as ammonia, urea, or the nitrate ion.
What are the main characteristics of animals?
Animals are a very diverse group of organisms, but all of them share a number of characteristics. Animals are multicellular eukaryotes that are heterotrophic, ingesting and digesting food inside the body. Animal cells lack the cell walls that provide support in the bodies of plants and fungi. Most animals have muscle systems and nervous systems, responsible for movement and rapid response to stimuli in their environment. In addition, most animals reproduce sexually with the diploid stage dominating the life cycle. In most species a large, non-motile egg is fertilized by a small, flagellated sperm, thus forming a diploid zygote. The transformation of a zygote to an animal of a specific form depends on the controlled expression in the developing embryo of special regulatory genes.
When is it more economical to restart an automobile rather than let it idle?
Tests by the Environmental Protection Agency have shown that it is more economical to turn an engine off rather than let it idle if the idle time exceeds 60 seconds.
Who was the first person to break the sound barrier?
On October 14, 1947, Charles E. Chuck Yeager, 1923, was the first pilot to break the sound barrier. He flew a Bell X-1, attaining a speed of 750 miles, 1,207 kilometers per hour. Mach 1.06, and an altitude of 70,140 feet, 21,379 meters, over the town of Victorville, California. The first woman to break the sound barrier was Jacqueline Cochran. C. 1906 to 1980. On May 18, 1953, she flew a North American F-86 Sabre over Edwards Air Force Base in California, attaining the speed of 760 miles, 1,223 kilometers per hour.
How do lead-acid batteries work?
Lead-acid batteries consist of positive and negative lead plates suspended in a diluted sulfuric acid solution called an electrolyte. Everything is contained in a chemically and electrically inert case. As the cell discharges, sulfur molecules from the electrolyte bond with the lead plates, releasing excess electrons. The flow of electrons is called electricity.
What is the p53 gene?
Discovered in 1979, p53, sometimes referred to as the guardian angel of the genome, is a gene that, when a cell's DNA is damaged, acts as an emergency brake to halt the resulting cycle of cell division that can lead to tumor growth and cancer. It also acts as an executioner, programming damaged cells to self-destruct before their altered DNA can be replicated. However, when it mutates, p53 can lose its suppressive powers or have the devastating effect of actually promoting abnormal cell growth. Indeed, p53 is the most commonly mutated gene found in human tumors. Scientists have discovered a compound that could restore function to a mutant p53. Such a discovery may lead to the development of anti-cancer drugs targeting the mutant p53 gene.
Who is the father of zoology?
Aristotle, 384 to 322 b. CE, is considered the father of zoology. His contributions to zoology include vast quantities of information about the variety, structure, and behavior of animals. The analysis of the parts of living organisms, and the beginnings of the science of taxonomy.
Why does the color of clothing appear different in sunlight than it does in a store under fluorescent light?
White light is a blend of all the colors, and each color has a different wavelength. Although sunlight and fluorescent light both appear as white light, they each contain slightly different mixtures of these varying wavelengths. When sunlight and fluorescent light, white light, are absorbed by a piece of clothing, only some of the wavelengths, composing white light, reflect off the clothing. When the retina of the eye perceives the color of the clothing, it is really perceiving these reflected wavelengths. The mixture of wavelengths determines the color perceived. This is why an article of clothing sometimes appears to be a different color in the store than it does on the street.
How is silk made?
Silk fiber is a continuous protein filament produced by a silkworm to form its cocoon. The principal species used in commercial silk making is the mulberry silkworm. The larva of the silk moth Bombyx mori, belonging to the order Lepidoptera. The raw silk fiber has 3 elements: 2 filaments excreted from both of the silkworms, glands, and a soluble silk gum called sericin, which cements the filaments together. It is from these filaments that the caterpillar constructs a cocoon around itself. The process of silk making starts with raising silkworms on diets of mulberry leaves for 5 weeks until they spin their cocoons. Then the cocoons are treated with heat to kill the silkworms inside. Otherwise, when the moths emerged, they would break the long silk filaments. After the cocoons are soaked in hot water, the filaments of 5 to 10 cocoons are unwound in the reeling process and twisted into a single thicker filament, still too fine for weaving. These twisted filaments are twisted again into a thread that can be woven.
What is high technology or high tech?
This buzz term used mainly by the lay media, as opposed to scientific, medical, or technological media, appeared in the late 1970s. It was initially used to identify the newest, hottest application of technology to fields such as medical research, genetics, automation, communication systems, and computers. It usually implied a distinction between technology to meet the information Needs of society and traditional heavy industry, which met more material needs. By the mid-1980s, the term had become a catch-all applying primarily to the use of electronics, especially computers, to accomplish everyday tasks.
What is the fourth state of matter?
Plasma, a mixture of free electrons and ions or atomic nuclei, is sometimes referred to as a fourth state of matter. Plasmas occur in thermonuclear reactions as in the Sun, in fluorescent lights, and in stars. When the temperature of gas is raised high enough, the collision of atoms becomes so violent that electrons are knocked loose from their nuclei. The result of a gas having loose, negatively charged electrons and heavier, positively charged nuclei is called a plasma. All matter is made up of atoms. Animals and plants are organic matter. Minerals and water are inorganic matter. Solid, liquid, and gas are the first three states of matter. Whether matter appears as a solid, liquid, or gas depends on how the molecules are held together in their chemical bonds. Solids have a rigid structure in the atoms of the molecules. In liquids the molecules are close together but not packed. In a gas, the molecules are widely spaced and move around, occasionally colliding but usually not interacting.
What are the similarities and differences between the nervous system and the endocrine system?
The endocrine and nervous are both regulatory systems that permit communication between cells, tissues, and organs. Both systems are devoted to maintaining homeostasis by coordinating and regulating the activities of other cells. Tissues, organs, and systems. Both systems are regulated by negative feedback mechanisms. Chemical messengers are important in both systems, although their method of transmission and release differs in the two systems. A major difference between the endocrine system and nervous system is the rate of response to a stimulus. In general, the nervous system responds to a stimulus very rapidly, often within a few milliseconds, while it may take the endocrine system seconds and sometimes hours or even days to offer a response. Furthermore, the chemical signals released by the nervous system typically act over very short distances. A synapse, while hormones in the endocrine system are generally carried by the blood to target organs. Finally, the effects of the nervous system generally last only a brief amount of time, while those of the endocrine system are longer lasting.
How many feet are on each side of an acre that is square?
An acre that is square in shape has about 208.7 feet, 64 meters, on each side.
Who showed that plant cells were totipotent?
In 1958 Frederick Campion Stewart, 1904 to 1993, a botanist at Cornell University, successfully regenerated an entire carrot plant from a tiny piece of phloem. Small pieces of tissue from carrots were grown in a nutrient broth. Cells that broke free from the fragments dedifferentiated, meaning that they reverted to unspecialized cells. However, as these unspecialized cells grew, they divided and redifferentiated back into specialized cell types. Eventually, cell division and redifferentiation produced entire new plants. Each unspecialized cell from the nutrient broth expressed its genetic potential to make all the other cell types in a plant.
What was the Turk?
The Turk was the name for a famous chess-playing automaton. An automaton, such as a robot, is a mechanical figure constructed to act as if it moves by its own power. On a dare in 1770, a civil servant in the Vienna imperial court named Wolfgang von Kempelen, 1734 to 1804, created a chess-playing machine. This mustached, man-sized figure carved from wood wore a turban, trousers, and robe, and sat behind a desk. In one hand it held a long Turkish pipe, implying that it had just finished a pre-game smoke. And its innards were filled with gears, pulleys, and cams. The machine seemed a keen chess player and dumbfounded onlookers by defeating all the best human chess players. It was a farce, however. Its moves were surreptitiously made by a man hiding inside. The Turk, so dubbed because of the outfit similar to traditional Turkish garb, is regarded as a forerunner to the Industrial Revolution because it created a commotion over devices that could complete complex tasks. Historians argue that it inspired people to invent other early devices such as the power loom and the telephone. And it even was a precursor to concepts such as artificial intelligence and computerization. Today, however, computer chess games are so sophisticated that they can defeat even the world's best chess masters. In May 1997, the Deep Blue chess computer defeated world champion Garry Kasparov, 1963. Deep Blue was a 32-node IBM R/6000 SP high-performance computer that used Power 2 superchip processors, P2SC. Each node had a single microchannel card containing 8 dedicated VLSI chess processors for a total of 256 processors working in tandem, allowing Deep Blue to calculate 100 to 200 billion chess moves within 3 minutes.
What is the process known as hydrocarbon cracking?
Cracking is a process that uses heat to decompose complex substances. Hydrocarbon cracking is the decomposition by heat, with or without catalysts. Of petroleum or heavy petroleum fractions, groupings, to give materials of lower boiling points. Thermal cracking, developed by William Burton, 1865 to 1954, in 1913. Uses heat and pressure to break some of the large heavy hydrocarbon molecules into smaller gasoline-grade ones. The cracked hydrocarbons are then sent to a flash chamber where the various fractions are separated. Thermal cracking not only doubles the gasoline yield, but has improved gasoline quality. Producing gasoline components with good anti-knock characteristics, no premature fuel ignition.
How long do animals, in particular mammals, live?
Of the mammals, humans and fin whales live the longest. Below is the maximum lifespan for several animal species.
What group of animals was the first to make a partial transition from water to land?
Amphibians have made a partial transition to terrestrial life. The living amphibians include newts, salamanders, frogs, and toads. Although lungfish made a partial transition to living out of the water. Amphibians were the first to struggle onto land and become adapted to a life of breathing air while not constantly surrounded by water.
What are the Van Allen belts?
The Van Allen belts, or zones, are two regions of highly charged particles above Earth's equator trapped by the magnetic field that surrounds Earth. Also called the magnetosphere, the first belt extends from a few hundred to about 2,000 miles, 3,200 kilometers, above Earth's surface, and the second is between 9,000 and 12,000 miles, 14,500 to 19,000 kilometers. The particles, mainly protons and electrons, come from the solar wind and cosmic rays. The belts are named in honor of James Van Allen, 1914 to 2006. The American physicist who discovered them in 1958 and 1959 with the aid of radiation counters. Carried aboard the artificial satellites Explorer I, 1958, and Pioneer 3, 1959. In May 1998 there were a series of large, solar disturbances that caused a new Van Allen belt to form in the so-called slot region between the inner and outer Van Allen belts. The new belt eventually disappeared once the solar activity subsided. There were also a number of satellite upsets around the same time involving the Galaxy 4 satellite, Iridium satellites, and others. This is not the first time that a temporary new belt has been observed to form in the same region. But it takes a prolonged period of solar storm activity to populate this region with particles.
What are brown fields?
The Environmental Protection Agency defines brownfields as abandoned, idled, or underused industrial or commercial sites where expansion or redevelopment is complicated by real or perceived environmental contamination. Real estate developers perceive brownfields as inappropriate sites for redevelopment. There are approximately 450,000 brownfields in the United States, with the heaviest concentrations being in the Northeast and Midwest.
Is there a national flower for the United States?
The United States adopted the rose as the national flower on October 7, 1986. After many years of deliberation, other flowers suggested were the dogwood, the mountain laurel, and the columbine.
What was the name of the personal computer introduced by Apple in the early 1980s?
Lisa was the name of the personal computer that Apple introduced. The forerunner of the Macintosh personal computer, Lisa had a graphical user interface and a mouse.
What is the sunspot cycle?
It is the fluctuating number of sunspots on the Sun during an 11-year period. The variation in the number of sunspots seems to correspond with the increase or decrease in the number of solar flares. An increased number of sunspots means an increased number of solar flares.
What are bryophytes and where are they found?
Mosses, liverworts, and hornworts, collectively known as bryophytes, are often found in moist environments. However, there are species that inhabit almost all environments. From hot, dry deserts to the coldest regions of Antarctica. They are most noticeable when they grow in a dense mass. They are generally small, compact plants that rarely grow to more than 8 inches, 20 centimeters, tall. They have parts that appear leaf-like, stem-like, and root-like, and lack vascular tissue, xylem and phloem.
When was gas lighting invented?
In 1799, Philippe Lebon. 1767 to 1804, patented a method of distilling gas from wood for use in a thermolamp, a type of lamp. By 1802, William Murdoch, 1754–1839, installed gas lighting in a factory in Birmingham, England. The introduction of widespread, reliable interior illumination enabled dramatic changes in commerce and manufacturing.
What is the largest rainforest?
The Amazon basin is the world's largest continuous tropical rainforest. It covers about 2.7 million square miles, 6.9 million square kilometers.
What is the biggest known tornado?
The tornado on May 22, 2004 in Hallam, Nebraska holds the record for the peak width of any tornado at nearly 2.5 miles, 4 kilometers, across.
What is a hacker?
A hacker is a skilled computer user. The term originally denoted a skilled programmer. 5. Particularly one skilled in machine code and with a good knowledge of the machine and its operating system. The name arose from the fact that a good programmer could always hack an unsatisfactory system around until it worked. The term later came to denote a user whose main interest is in defeating secure systems. The term has thus acquired a pejorative sense, with the meaning of one who deliberately and sometimes criminally interferes with data available through telephone lines. The activities of such hackers have led to considerable efforts to tighten security of transmitted data. The hacker ethic is that information sharing is the proper way of human dealing, and, indeed, it is the responsibility of hackers to liberally impart their wisdom to the software world by distributing information. Many hackers are hired by companies to test their web security.
If a magnetic bar is cut in two, will it yield a North Pole and a South Pole magnet?
Every magnet contains both a North Pole and a South Pole. There are no magnets which are purely north or south. Cutting a magnetic bar in half will produce two magnets each with a North Pole and a South Pole.
What color is an iceberg?
Most icebergs are blue and white. However, 1 in 1,000 icebergs in Antarctica is emerald green. They are only found in Antarctica because the northern hemisphere is not cold enough. These icebergs form when sea water freezes to the bottom of floating ice shelves. The ice looks green from the combination of yellow and blue. Yellow is from the yellowish-brown remains of dead plankton dissolved in seawater and trapped in the ice. Blue is present because although ice reflects virtually all the wavelengths of visible light, it absorbs slightly more red wavelengths than blue.
Who invented the cyclotron?
The cyclotron was invented by Ernest Lawrence, 1901 to 1958, at the University of California, Berkeley, in 1934, to study the nuclear structure of the atom. The cyclotron produced high-energy particles that were accelerated outwards in a spiral rather than through an extremely long, linear accelerator.
What is Lamarckian evolution?
The French biologist Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck, 1744 to 1829, is credited as the first person to propose a theory that attempts to explain how and why evolutionary change occurs in living organisms. The mechanism Lamarck proposed is known as the inheritance of acquired characteristics, meaning that what individuals experience during their lifetime will be passed along to their offspring as genetic traits. This is sometimes referred to as the theory of use and disuse. A classic example of this would be the giraffe's neck. Lamarckian evolution would predict that as giraffes stretch their necks to reach higher branches on trees, their necks grow longer. As a result, this increase in neck length will be transmitted to egg and sperm such that the offspring of giraffes whose necks have grown will also have long necks. While Lamarck's idea was analytically based on available data, giraffes have long necks and give birth to offspring with long necks as well. He did not know that. In general, environmental factors do not change genetic sequences in such a direct fashion.
Why is El Niño harmful?
Along the west coast of South America, near the end of each calendar year, a warm current of nutrient-poor tropical water moves southward, replacing the cold, nutrient-rich surface water. Because this condition frequently occurs around Christmas, local residents call it El Niño. Spanish for child, referring to the Christ child. In most years the warming lasts for only a few weeks. However, when El Niño conditions last for many months, the economic results can be catastrophic. It is this extended episode of extremely warm water that scientists now refer to as El Niño. During a severe El Niño, large numbers of fish and marine plants may die. Decomposition of the dead material depletes the water's oxygen supply, which leads to the bacterial production of huge amounts of smelly hydrogen sulfide. A greatly reduced fish, especially anchovy, harvest affects the world's fish meal supply, leading to higher prices for poultry and other animals that normally are fed fish meal. Anchovies and sardines are also major food sources for marine mammals, such as sea lions and seals. When the food source is in short supply, these animals travel farther from their homes in search of food. Not only do many sea lions and seals starve, but also a large proportion of the infant animals die. The major El Niño event of 1997 to 1998 indirectly caused 100 human deaths and $33 billion in damage globally.